The hip-hop of musician Rebel Diaz in New York City, Harlem, and the South Bronx is a creative response to oppression from a mixture of African-American, Caribbean, and Latin roots. Real USA Today offers an exclusive interview with documentary filmmaker Kevin Peña, who talks about racism and police brutality in the troubled city of Oakland and California. The Republican-controlled state legislature in Arizona passed a bill restricting the rights of the LGBT communities based on religious grounds. In February, the bill was vetoed by Governor Jan Brewer, well known for anti-immigrant policies. Welcome to Real USA. I am Maria Lourdes Pallais, reporting from the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. The Smithsonian is one of the world's largest museums. Real USA wants to bring you the reality behind the melting pot that this country is. So first, let's take a look at Andrea Arena's story about an Afro-American film festival here in Washington, D.C. The festival was an amazing success here, to the surprise of their organizers. Let's take a look.
The new African Films Festival opened its doors for the first time for the residents of Washington, D.C. 10 years ago. Back then, Mawisa Montali, Director of Public Relations of the NGO Trans-Africa, could not have imagined the event that his organization helped to organize would be as popular as welcomed as it currently is, especially among African Americans.
You can see that there's an interest. People are waiting to see the festival. Also, when we're picking the films, 10 years ago, there were fewer selections from the continent. Now there's so many.
Happy Independence Day.
One of the most acclaimed films this year was based on the second book written by Nigerian author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Her first literary success, Half of a Yellow Sun, still captivates readers. In the historic novel, the author recalls the hardships of the characters that have been divided by the Biafra War, a civil war that took place in Nigeria in the 60s, in which various ethnic groups clashed in that African country, a past that few African Americans know, and the big screen helps them see reality.
Sometimes only a particular viewpoint about African films, about Africa, is put out there. So it's good to also be able to show stories being told by Africans about what goes on in Africa.
It's a voice, a collective voice, and collective stories that are lesser told, and perspectives that are so unique, not only because they are of Africa, but certainly of the experiences of Africans.
I think there's a lot of misconceptions about Africa, and I feel like the more these films are being shown, the more books are written, the more people get to understand about Africa and its culture. And it will help people understand that it's not that we're living in huts, it's like we actually have a rich tradition, have a rich history.
Chimamanda asserted that the success of African films should not surprise anyone.
I'm really looking forward to a time when we don't even have to talk about, oh, isn't it interesting that black people were honored this year, you know.
For Africans that live far from their countries, for African Americans that have been living for decades in the U.S., and also for the other U.S. citizens, African films have opened a window into that continent, its peoples, its culture, and its history.
Andrea Arenas para Telesur, Washington.
And now let's move on from the silver screen to music, specifically to the music of Rebel Diaz in New York City, to be precise in Harlem and the South Bronx, where hip-hop was born as a creative result to oppression, with Latin, African-American, and Caribbean roots. Let's see what Vanessa Bergonzoli has to show us.
Hip-hop culture originated in the Bronx from the musical heritage of African-American, Caribbean, and Latin cultures, as a way to give voice to the struggles faced in the community. Hip-hop culture is alive in the work of Rebel Diaz, used as a form of resistance and creative self-expression.
We always understood like hip-hop is a response, is a poor people's response to being forgotten systematically. You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, you gonna cut music programs, we gonna turn a turntable into an instrument. You know what I'm saying? You gonna cut our programs, I'm gonna write my name on your train.
You know, the South Bronx is, today, 40 years after the hip-hop's birth, still there's conditions of unemployment, of lack of access to proper schooling, education, and health, you know what I mean? So for us, we realized that the hip-hop was born out of that context. And so it's still, the essence of it is resistance, because it comes from people that come from these conditions. It's our communities, you know.
Through hip-hop culture and their music, Rebel Diaz engages their community in social justice conversations. They organize media literacy workshops for young people that provide alternative models to the materialism glorified by the rap industry. Instead, Rebel Diaz takes ideas from the Zapatista movement to strengthen their community.
We are very inspired by the Zapatista struggle. When we celebrate the 20th anniversary, we are celebrating 20 years of resistance against an economic model that is leading us to the destruction of the planet.
And for us, that's to us the most revolutionary thing we could do in the context in which we're in today. In an era of police state, here in New York City, in the United States in general, safe spaces where people can practice culture is the last resort that we have. Because we know we don't look anymore to the solutions for politicians in the left or the right or whatever political party. And young people are like, you know what, this is about creating collectives and creating sustainability and creating autonomous spaces where we can create alternative culture. You know what I mean? And I think that's the work what our work has consisted of here in the Bronx for the last few years.
We did a video called "I'm an Alien." It was a song that it was a response to, you know, we're living a state in which immigrants are under attack in the U.S. You know, you've had, under Obama, you've had the most deportations ever, families separated, you know, and we wanted to show visually the reality of what people live through. You know, immigrant raids, ICE, right, the La Migra, comes to your house. So in the video you see us running and you see the hero in the story is a little girl, you know, and she sends G11 away and sends the Migra in the other direction. And I think that while it's something subtle and simple, it's the beauty that there's power in our community. We talk about legalization for all. That's why at the end of the video you see no human being is illegal. You know what I mean? El hecho que, you know, ningún ser humano es ilegal. Así de simple.
Rebel Diaz continues their work at the intersection of hip-hop culture, identity, and self-determination to organize communities in the Bronx. This is Vanessa Bergonzoli with Clara Ibarra for Telesur, New York.
It's time for us to take our first break. Coming up, you will see a story of a children's orchestra in LA that was created for them to have access to culture. Moving on from urban music in the form of hip-hop to a community effort in Los Angeles designed to help children living in poverty in that area. Lindsay Mastis reports.
The fact these kids are playing music at all is a miracle. Most of them live below the poverty line. Their parents can't afford to buy or rent instruments. They're part of a youth orchestra run by the Los Angeles Philharmonic. Their instruments were donated. The lessons are free. It's music that keeps these kids off the streets, away from gangs, and out of trouble.
We have issues with gangs in our parks. We have issues of crime in our area. Many of our students live in one room with their entire family. And so really Yola Ola being this after-school program serves as a haven for a lot of our kids. It's a safe place for them to be.
I was like a very mischievous kid. And I would like get in trouble a lot, and I think I would have continued to get in trouble at school. And I think with Yola, I found like this passion and love with music, and it just completely changed me.
Raymond Chavez started playing clarinet a couple years ago and was able to travel with the LA Philharmonic to London to perform. It's the only time he's ever traveled. His younger brothers are also in the program.
It changed me a lot because when I didn't have Yola, I had a lower grade.
I want to go past college and get a diploma and be a professional trumpet player.
The students rehearse together 5 days a week, and many of them practice every single day. But some of the students can't take their instruments home with them.
April was one of those students.
Ever since I was 9, I lived in a homeless shelter. So I never really got a chance to play at home.
April and her mother moved around, jumping from shelter to shelter. This was the only constant in April's life.
So she's had a focus and stability with this music program, and that's really, I think, made a tremendous difference.
Conductor Gustavo Dudamel modeled the youth orchestra program after Venezuela's music education program called El Sistema. He works in solidarity with students from both countries. The Los Angeles-based program, which began in 2007, has had a profound impact on the lives of more than 500 at-risk youth.
This is not only a musical program, a regular musical program where you learn music, to be a musician. So we start only to give an instrument, to give hope to the children who maybe never thought, to be a musician or to play an instrument.
The program has not only kept these kids away from drugs and gangs, but has also inspired many of them to pursue music as a career. Lindsay Mastis for Telesur, Los Angeles.
And now from Denver, we have a story about the important influence of Afro-American culture in Southern cuisine, where paradoxically, most chefs are white Anglo-Saxon. Mary McCarthy has the story.
Cora Faye's restaurant in Denver serves a traditional soul food menu, from black-eyed peas and cornbread to fried chicken and catfish.
Fish is big in African-American cuisine, and that goes way back. In fact, it reflects our heritage as a coastal people, because in West Africa, fish is a very prevalent part of the diet. Then we've also got candied.
Adrian Miller's history traces many soul food staples not only to slave culture, but all the way across the Atlantic to African cuisine.
Several foods like black-eyed peas, called cowpeas in Africa, okra, watermelon, to some extent something called ground nuts, very similar to peanuts. All of those were native to West Africa.
And when African slaves to the Americas couldn't find the ingredients they were used to, they created substitutes.
Perfect example is greens. Greens are huge in West African cuisine, and there's a bitter leaf, it's called bitter leaf, that's really popular. So over here, a lot of the soul food greens are bitter greens. Collard, mustard, turnips, to some extent cabbage and kale.
Adrian Miller argues that soul food's history is as rich as that of jazz, and equally pertinent to African American culture. But he says that because of a lack of economic empowerment that persists today, blacks in America have had a hard time making money from soul food.
If you are someone who can't get the necessary capital to start your business off, you're often starting behind the 8 ball. Even in the 1920s, I'm reading articles from people who want to start restaurants, and they're talking about how they can't get money, they don't have access to loans, they don't have access to credit, they don't have that family network that could give them a lot of funds to start up their business. And so it just makes it very, very difficult.
In his year-long book tour across America, Miller has been trying to dispel some of the prejudices that have led to soul food being misunderstood and underappreciated, including the misconception that all soul food is unhealthy.
And I think it has a horrible reputation for 2 main reasons. There have been 2 steady criticisms of soul food. One is that if you eat these foods at a prolonged rate, it's going to kill you, right? It's the idea that soul food needs a warning label. The second one is that soul food is slave food. It's the master's leftovers. Why are we celebrating these foods? It's not worthy of celebration. And so my book goes a long way into actually investigating those arguments and seeing if they hold up.
Many of Miller's book signing events are combined with cooking demonstrations, teaching diverse audiences how to make dishes ranging from hibiscus tea to collard greens. The nationwide success and popularity of Adrian Miller's History of Soul Food has led to his next project, which is another chapter in the story of blacks and American cuisine. He's writing a book about the long-esteemed history of black chefs in the White House. Mary McCarthy for Telesur, Denver.
It's time for a second break. We now move on to more controversial subjects: police abuses in Oakland, California, and the bill against homosexuals in Arizona. From the city of Oakland, California, Maria Bick talks to documentary filmmaker Kevin Peña about his film Occupy Oakland that deals with racism and police brutality in that troubled city.
Filmmaker Kevin Peña was born and raised in Oakland, California. He is now making a documentary film about the Occupy movement in Oakland.
The way to really explain Oakland and why Oakland was special was to put the Occupy movement in the context of the history of Oakland, which I think was more natural to the story. And once I did that, it basically has begun telling itself. I think probably one of the central issues has to be police brutality against the community, the black community in particular, and how there's been consistent racism, and how we've had a police department that's been out of control in Oakland for decades for black communities and black families that are trying to live there. Crime, violence, poverty, and drugs. Gang violence was up, not so much as a result of the gangs themselves, as much as it was this policy, again, of the police and the way that they were policing communities. And Oakland's been on the verge of social unrest for the last decade at least, in a way that it had, not since the 60s and since the Black Panthers. So Occupy Oakland really exposed the role of the police in the community to a level and an extent publicly that people across the country never understood. But I think once you saw the flashbang grenades, all the tear gas, this brought the brutality of the Oakland Police Department to the forefront. There's been this history, and especially with it resonating from the time of the Black Panthers, of communities taking responsibility for taking care of their own, particularly when it comes to social services and in the black community. The Black Panther Party had started some of the first breakfast programs in the country, and that was in Oakland. The Black Panthers began some of the self-education of black youth. I think that a lot of that same spirit, the sense of doing for yourself and being self-sufficient and not counting on the government to do it for you, was seen in the encampments in Occupy Oakland. To what they believed they were building in those camps, which was very much an alternative to, let's face it, life in the United States today can be very isolating. There's not a great sense of community, and when an event happens that people are able to capture and get that sense of community back, it's a very special moment for them. The Occupy movement, not just in Oakland, but internationally and in the United States, is part of our legacy. It's part of our collective history. And the only way that future generations are going to see it through the eyes of those who participate in it is if we have documents like this that show them. And so that's really what the intention is of this film.
This is Maria Juliana Bick in Oakland, California for Telesur.
In Arizona, most are not happy with the Republican-controlled state legislature that a few months ago passed a bill restricting access and curtailing the rights of the LGBT community. In February, the governor, Jan Brewer, known for anti-immigrant policies, vetoed the bill. Aisa Garcia reports.
Legislation against homosexuals turned Arizona into the epicenter of a controversy. If the SB 1062 proposed bill had not been vetoed, it would have allowed individuals and companies to deny services to homosexuals based on their religious beliefs.
I feel like it's kind of a couple steps back for our community. I mean, we've taken so many giant leaps forward in the equal rights campaign and trying, really hard to make big leaps for our younger community out there. There's a lot of younger people coming out lately.
I thought it was horrible. I personally felt that my rights were being infringed upon, and I was really proud to see our community come together to fight to rally to veto against it. So.
John Brewer, hardline Republican governor of Arizona, surprised the groups that defend sexual diversity when she vetoed the controversial and criticized legislature bill.
I've not heard of one example in Arizona where business owners' religious liberty has been violated. The bill is broadly worded and could result in unintended and negative consequences.
And this shows this nation that not all Arizonans are like those extremists, and that there are good people here.
The governor's decisions were cheered on the streets, but the proposal in Congress continues generating rejection, not only among people in general, but also among multinational corporations and important business owners in Phoenix.
En este estado está pasando algo que quizás nos haga pensar que estamos en el año 1895 o 1932 o quizás hasta 1964, pero en el 2014 no, pero aún actúa como que estamos en esas épocas. Hay discriminación y la tratan de vestir basada que Jesús y la religión. Contra los gays, hay discriminación contra la gente de color.
Sylvania was among a group of business owners who called and wrote letters to the office of the Republican governor in order to warn about the negative consequences that the bill could have on the state's economy.
Aunque lo haga hecho veto, de todos modos, estamos perdiendo ya turismo. Y como se dice en inglés, we have egg in our face, ya tenemos la mancha, ¿no? Ya estamos manchados, ya somos el chiste, ya somos un chiste. Tenemos que tratar de cambiar esa imagen.
Although the bill will not become law, many businesses still display signs that disapprove the bill. They do that just in case the government changes its opinion.
Pues ahorita hay la ley SB 1072 que es contra los homosexuales, pero también realmente puede ser usado para discriminar contra quien sea, nomás por sus ideas religiosas. Pero luego también hubo SB 1070 que fue contra los inmigrantes y pues nosotros estamos sufriendo porque para nosotros esas leyes no tienen sentido.
The controversy that resulted from the bill against homosexuals has put Republicans on the defensive before the legislative elections that will take place this year. Nevertheless, the most conservative elements from that party still emphasize social issues that completely polarize U.S. society. The same group that proposed SB 1062 in Congress is the one behind another initiative that could allow sanitary officials to inspect and rate abortion clinics without the need of a judicial warrant.
Aisa Garcia, Telesur, Phoenix, Arizona.
This is it for now, folks. Please remember to send your comments and suggestions to our email and our Twitter. I am Maria Lourdes Pallais. See you next time.
Let's go. Yup, I'm an alien from planet Chile, a Bolivarian galaxy that will be the illest. Welcome to my world, the people's universe. Let's have a conversation that'll make it so. Search Earth, mother, it feels good to say things that uplift the hood. For what it's worth, we've been here for a while. Follow the moon, take a walk for a mile in the shoes of the man that picked your fruit. I want access to schools, I don't want to join the troops. You came to my country, you brought the dictator. Gave him money and told him pay me later. So taste the tomato, whatever. The students, the farmers, working together. Pa'lante inmigrante, no a la guerra. Mundo mapuche, siempre, forever.